lives, we have been told to be afraid to go into the woods. Every bedtime story we're ever read reminds us of the dangers lurking there. When the main character goes into the woods, what happens? Well, take the case of Little Red Riding Hood, the sweet girl who goes to check on her sick grandmother, only to come face first with the big, bad wolf. Or how about the story of Hansel and Gretel, the two starving children who stumble upon a house made entirely of candy? It was as if their wildest dreams had come true, except inside lurked an evil witch with dark intentions. It's no wonder then that we're afraid to go into the woods. Bad things happen there. But what if I told you today that going into the woods helped me face my greatest fear? But first, I had to understand what that was. And it happened in the most unlikely place. One early Saturday morning, I was having breakfast, debating what to order. The world's bossiest waitress said to me, "They only had eggplant." Now, normally, I would leave such an establishment because who has eggplant for breakfast? But as the only customer in my kids' pretend restaurant that day, I guess eggplant it was. And in that moment, my phone dinged. I looked down to answer the notification and lost track of time. It was a few minutes had gone by, and it occurred to me that the room had gone too quiet for that of toddlers playing. As I looked up to assess the damage, I was surprised to find my 3-year-old daughter still standing right in front of me. Sheer look of disappointment on her face. And she said, "Mom, put down your phone." As I looked over at my 1-year-old son, he was still staring at the most important person in the room. Except it wasn't me, and it wasn't even my daughter. It was the little black box I held in my hands. And in that moment, I was crushed because I realized I wasn't being fully present in my life, and it wasn't the first time. But I didn't know how to fix it. Now, before you think this is another TEDx talk about the dangers of technology, I want to assure you, it's not. This is a talk about remembering our humanity and what's most important in life. Because when I was 4 years old, not much older than my daughter is now, I lost my own father in a tragic car accident. He didn't get the option to be present with me. He didn't get to teach me how to swim or ride a bike. He didn't get to greet the first boyfriend I ever had on the front porch like he had always threatened to. He didn't get to give me away at my wedding, and he didn't get to meet his own 2 grandchildren. And while my father missed out on some of life's most important moments, losing him taught me that the greatest gift we can give another human being is by being fully present with them. And that one tiny interaction with my 2 children brought me face to face with my greatest fear, that I wasn't doing that. With this heavy on my heart, I decided to do what I've normally done when faced with a big challenge in my life. I decided to go for a hike. And that's how I found myself on one freezing cold December day, hiking up the side of a foothill and thinking about all the areas I felt like I was failing. I felt like a bad mom. I didn't feel connected to myself. And I knew I wasn't feeling inspired in my work. I started asking myself all of the questions we normally do when faced with a big challenge. What's wrong? How did I get here? Of course, most importantly, how do I fix it? But nothing was coming to me. As I got to the top of the mountain that morning, I sat down to watch the sun come up, and that's when it occurred to me that maybe I'm asking the wrong questions. Maybe what I should be asking is, when was I the happiest in my life? When was I being the most present? And that's when the universal irony hit me. It's always been while I was hiking regularly. So I decided on top of the mountain that morning, if hiking was the answer, I was going to challenge myself to hike for 31 days straight in the month of January. Now, why I couldn't have had my life epiphany in the middle of May? Probably because the universe has a strange sense of humor like that. And even though it was often cold and the trails were packed with snow, I still showed up every day because this time the stakes were higher. I realized as I lost myself in motherhood, in my career, in my own life, I had to reconnect with the one person who could teach me how to be more present again, myself. But what is powerful presence? First, let's talk about what it's not. Being powerfully present is not going for a walk and listening to a podcast. It's not playing with your children and answering emails. And it's not having dinner with someone you love and waiting for your cell phone to distract you. Being powerfully present is showing up as your authentic self, fully engaged and content to be exactly where you are in that moment and time. The best way to cultivate it is by going for a walk. But it's not easy. We have to learn to be uncomfortable with our thoughts again. But once we do, it's beautiful. After a few weeks, I started to notice some things. First, I was sleeping better. My stress and anxiety were the lowest it had been in years. I found that I was becoming more creative and focused in my work. But the most beautiful side effect of my daily hikes is that as I was learning how to be more present on the trail with myself, I was also becoming more powerfully present with those that I love. Whether it was talking to my husband, playing with my children, or even in my everyday interactions, I was showing up. This past year, I've inspired hundreds of people to hike to find themselves again. There they all are. It became like some sort of weird occupational hazard. If I met you this past year, whether it was at a hotel conference, in an elevator, even if you were my Uber driver, I was going to try to convince you to hike to find yourself again. Most people I talked to wanted to give it a try. Some complete strangers even got emotional with me and said, this is exactly what they needed in life. Some people were excited and up for the challenge, while others a bit more intimidated, but wanting to try it. When I followed up a few weeks later to see how the daily hiking was going, I noticed a pattern emerge. First was that some people hiked only for a few days and stopped. And then second, people who hiked for 31 days or a majority of it and are still hiking today. So the business strategist in me grew very curious. I had to know what the difference was. I love data and I love research. So I started asking a lot of questions. Why weren't people finishing? What was holding them back? And what I noticed as we started to peel back the layers of excuses, people started to share with me that they were afraid to be alone with their own thoughts. Now, if this sounds silly to you, there's scientific evidence to back it up, and the results are quite literally shocking. A study out of the University of Virginia asked over 400 participants to sit alone in a room with nothing to distract them except, you guessed it, their own thoughts. What researchers discovered is that rather than sit alone in a room, most participants opted to give themselves a mild electric shock. The results of this study show that in our modern world, where we use being busy as currency and are constantly seeking the next distraction, the idea of sitting alone with our own thoughts is more terrifying than actual physical pain. While everyone's busy talking about the dangers of technology and just how addictive it is, what no one is talking about is why we keep reaching for that distraction. Could it be that we're afraid to sit alone with our own thoughts? Could it be realizing what exactly we're escaping each and every time we choose not to be present? Well, there's one way to find out. We have to go for a walk in nature and wrestle with the monster of our own mind. Just like I experienced back in January, Scientific studies show that spending as little as 10 minutes or more in nature can drastically reduce your stress and anxiety. 20 minutes or more can increase your mood or emotional well-being, and 30 minutes or more can improve your cognitive function. Now, for those of us who skip biology like I did, I had to Google that, that's our ability to think, become more creative, and problem solve. So if we're going to be uncomfortable with our own thoughts and what that might reveal to us, it might be a good idea to do it in a place that literally melts our anxiety, enhances our emotional well-being, and once our brain is fully activated, then we can process the information at a deeper level to understand ourselves, our lives, and how we're showing up in it. If technology is the tool that has helped us forget how to be powerfully present, then I want you to think of nature as the tool to help us remember. So if you want to cultivate being powerfully present in your own life, I have the perfect prescription for you. And great news, it doesn't involve little black boxes or electric shocks. It's simple. Go for a walk in nature, without technology, and be alone with your thoughts. If you can do this for 30 minutes, for approximately 31 days, I promise you that your life will never be the same. People have shared with me that this past year they have used this method to face addictive behaviors, to grieve lost loved ones, and even to find space to process feelings they didn't know that they had. And while no one has reported any negative side effects to this nature prescription I'm giving you, there is something I want to warn you about. Hiking alone can be scary. I had an experience this past summer in the Sawtooth Mountains, just outside Stanley, Idaho, a town so remote it only has a population of 117 people. My husband and I always pack our walkie-talkies because the cell phone reception is so bad. And I had planned an epic hike to an alpine lake. The night before, I tried to recruit some friends to join me. But one of them said, "There's been increased bear activity in the woods. I'm out." So it was no surprise when I woke up the next morning and none of the other cabin lights were on. I hit the trailhead at dawn, encountering only one other hiker headed into the wilderness. The woods were peaceful, yet alive. And as I practice this method so often now, I can actually feel all those different metrics hitting my body. After 10 minutes, I feel my stress melting away. 20 minutes, I feel euphoric and grateful for my daily hike. And after about 30 minutes, when my brain should have been switching on to full gear, the woods grew eerily quiet. And I thought, this is not normal. The hair on the back of my neck began to stand up. And that's when I heard it. It was a loud rustling in the bushes, way too loud to be that of just a chipmunk or a squirrel. I jumped, I turned around and saw nothing. I started hiking a little faster after that. So as I continued on, 10 minutes later, I heard that same sound again, except this time, it definitely sounded closer. I panicked. Now, even though I know better, I started to run. I swung my backpack around to my front to dig inside, to reach for my walkie-talkie, only to discover that in my hurry to hit the trail that morning, I had left it at home. So now I had two problems. First, something was definitely stalking me in the woods, and second, I had no way to communicate to the outside world where I was. I had a decision to make. I could either turn around and face whatever it was head on, or I could continue going and hope to run into that one other hiker that day. With the very real possibility, I did not want to come face first with a bear. I chose to hike on. After about a mile, I realized I hadn't heard the sound in a while. Decided to slow down, take a break. I reached for my water bottle, and that's when I heard a sound I will never forget. It was that same loud rustling noise, but this time it was directly behind me. My heart raced. I turned around slowly, only to discover why I didn't see anything in the woods that day. It was because the sound was coming from my water bottle sloshing around, scaring the hell out of me for the last 2.5 miles. So the warning I will give you is that yes, sometimes there really are monsters in the woods. But the scariest monster is our own mind. Hiking daily to find yourself may make you face some uncomfortable truths. You may realize that you're not living the life you truly wanted. You may have to face your greatest fears. Or you might just realize that you're not being present for some of life's most precious moments. But I want to encourage you to keep showing up for at least 31 days. Because who knows? You may just decide to have eggplant for breakfast.